Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending. First thing I want to do as we get started is introduce our new state director, Ms. Rhiannon Hampson.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's over here. Let me get over here. All right. We'll see if this. Hello, everyone. The very beginning of my prepared remarks had to do with how we're all being so resilient and brilliant during these continued times of COVID. And as you can see, we're working out some technical difficulties ourselves today. But I really do want to start by saying thank you to the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry for hosting the Maine Ag Trade Show and bringing partners together. I am constantly impressed by the tenacity that's on display during this continued pandemic. We're all pivoting and making changes and just, you know, having to catch up at the last moment. And today was no exception. So thank you so much for having me. You know, some of you know that I farm, so we have a livestock and dairy farm in Thomaston, and I always say that farmers are nothing if not resilient, and we're making these pivots constantly. And so Anne Trenholm and her team have again created something that happens without a blueprint, without a guidebook, and we're pulling it off together, so thank you. In the spirit of that, I would love to say thank you to Ivana Hernandez-Pluki, who's our business loans specialist, and I'm sharing her office right now to overcome any of our technical difficulties. Many of you know her because she's been shepherding you through this process. She's been your cruise director at rural development here in Maine. And she too has been pivoting and updating and demonstrating resilience while doing a wonderful job. I'm new, but her reputation preceded me here. Everyone was telling me about what a fantastic joy she was to work with before we came. So I'm thrilled to be here with her today. So the best part of my job right now is the big check moment. And I'm wanting to acknowledge that I know there are a lot of people on this call who are just learning about VAPG today for the first time, and they're trying to decide, is this worth it? Is it worth going through this whole application process? And it can seem daunting when you're already busy farming or having a small business to come up with all of this info. And so I want to say, is $2 million worth it? So yes, it's totally worth it. Today, USDA Rural Development here in Maine is announcing that 10 farms and agribusinesses are receiving a total of $2,027,149 through the Value-Added Producer Grant Program. And in fact, in the last 5 years, rural development here in Maine has awarded almost $5 million to 29 recipients. That created at least 68 jobs. It saved 19. And we know that as those businesses grow and become more sustainable through the multi-year help of this VAPG, that number goes up. So we're thrilled. Farms like Coppertail Farm in Waldoboro, they're our neighbors actually, and they're receiving one of the awards today to expand their creamery and goat dairy production, as well as bring their goat's milk soaps to a greater audience. Dandelion Spring Farm in Bodenham. If anyone farming in Maine doesn't know who Beth is, I would be shocked. We all know that she's not only one of the hardest working market farmers that we have, but she's also a mentor and an advocate. We're thrilled that this investment is going to be able to help support her farming so that she can continue all of those other activities that she does that really supports the Maine farmscape. Blue Barons Farm in Columbia, which I mean, I've had organic berries from them for a long time. I'm so happy to know that they are receiving one of these to expand fresh pack capacity. And Brodus Wild Blueberries and Hope. So they're not just creating new and innovative ways to enjoy our state fruit, but they're helping preserve a heritage industry here in Maine. It's a multi-generational, I think 7 was the number I heard, 7th generation blueberry farm here in Maine. Each of these 10 awardees and all of the value-added producer grant recipients prior to this are bringing high quality, Maine grown and produced food to the tables of their broader communities through these grants, this support. Old Haven Farm with their fantastic pork and preserves, Tide Mill Organic Farm bringing Maine organic chicken to the larger New England community, going from one border, hopefully straight through the other with this assistance. Wandering Goat Farm with their soaps Mainly Poultry, another one of our neighbor farms right down the road, helping to expand their production to feed our best good boys with this. I'm excited to see what kind of new products they're going to come up with. And they're joining Coppertail Farm, Dandelion Spring, Blue Barons, and Brodus Farms, not only in creating more space on the Maine farm and foodscape, but they're preserving critical farmland and habitat, because what's in economic sustainable production cannot be developed. And that's good for us, that's good for our economy, but that's also really fantastic for our environment. The Passamaquoddy tribe at Medukmagook is expanding its maple syrup business with this value-added producer grant. But really, there's so much more to that. We know that the collection and rendering of tree sap in North America was created by our indigenous peoples millennia ago. And there's this tradition, this cultural preservation component to what they're doing. And that's just, it's unquantifiable, right? That's critical. And likewise, Vertical Bay in Belfast is innovating a traditional food. So they're taking Maine scallops, which we all grew up having. By all means, that's a heritage food. And they're innovating that to create new and sustainable ways to grow and harvest those for Maine, for our foodscape. So again, thank you to all 10 awardees for the exciting work that you're about to do, for the hard work that you put in order to get to this point in the first place. And to everyone considering this, please don't hesitate to think of us when you're considering your farm and food business. I usually end up saying we've got a program for that, because between our farm worker housing, our business support, our economic development grants, and very low interest loans, we're here to help and keep you growing. So thank you. And I can't wait to have more preserves, more goat's milk soap, more Chev, more of everything best that you guys are all doing. Thank you so much, Ivana, for giving me a moment to do this.
Hi, everyone. So we are going to continue with going over the value-added producer grant, what it's for, different applicant eligibility, and different project eligibility. So to get started, the value-added producer grant is to develop businesses that produce and market value-added agricultural products, and to create marketing opportunities for such businesses, much like the ones you just heard from the state director. So first, we're going to cover applicant eligibility. So applicants first must be agricultural producers. This is defined as an individual entity. The important part is not only producing the agricultural commodity, but participating in the day-to-day labor management and field operations of that farm. And if you're a harvester, you have to have the legal right to harvest that commodity. There are 4 eligible applicant types: independent producers, agricultural producer groups, farmer rancher cooperatives, and majority controlled producer-based businesses. We're going to cover independent producers as that is the most common type of applicant we've seen in Maine. And except for one value-added grant we've done, they've all been independent producers. So that is an individual agricultural producer entity that is solely owned and controlled by ag producers, and they are directly engaged in the production of the subject agricultural commodity. All applicants must produce and own more than 50% of the raw commodity. So what that means is you have to at least own 51% of the raw commodity that's being used for the value-added product. Best way to explain this, if you're doing something like goat soap, the 51% of the goat milk being used for the soap has to come from your own dairy. You have to own the product from its raw commodity all the way through the value-added production of it, and meet citizenship or residency requirements. So for project eligibility, projects need to meet one of the 5 value-added product methodologies. We're going to go into each of them more in detail later. They need to show that there will be an increase in customer base. and demonstrate that there will be increased revenue from the process. The 5 methodologies are change in physical state, produced in a manner that enhances the value of the commodity, physical segregation, farmer rancher-based renewable energy, and locally produced agricultural food. So change in physical state is an irreversible processing activity that alters that raw commodity and enhances its value. Some of the examples listed here: milk into cheese, wheat into flour, livestock into packaged meat. So basically, anytime you're taking that raw commodity and changing it to enhance its value, its longevity, its shelf life, things like that. Produced in a manner is a value-added product has to be produced in a recognizably coherent set of agricultural production practices. So the way most common examples of this are organic produce or organic anything really, and eggs from free-range chickens. Physical segregation is not one we've seen much of in Maine, but it's the result of physically separating an ag commodity from other varieties of the same commodity. The separation has to happen on farm during production and harvesting. So most common example is GMO corn separated from non-GMO corn. Another one we don't see too much of in Maine is farmer ranch-based renewable energy. So this is an ag commodity that's used to generate renewable energy on the farm. So if you're doing like dairy manure into methane and electricity that has to be generated on the farm. Same thing with corn into biodiesel that's generated on the farm. And then the last one is locally produced agricultural food product. That's any food product that's marketed and distributed within 400 miles of the origin. So either 400 miles of the farm, or it could also be sold just in its origin state. So if you have a farm and you're only selling in the state of Maine, it would be a locally produced agricultural food product. So like I said, a farm growing fruits and vegetables that only sell, let's say, to Maine, in Maine farmers markets. So now we're going to go over the different types of grants. There are 2 types of grants under value-added producer grant. First is the planning grant. It has a maximum grant amount of $75,000. It's to pay a qualified third-party consultant to develop a feasibility, marketing, and business plan for the value-added product. And then there's the working capital grant, has a maximum grant amount of $250,000, and it's to pay for eligible expenses related to the processing and marketing of that product. And we're going to go into some more of the grant uses next. So for planning grants, the majority of the funds, the grant and the matching funds, are going to go towards the consultant piece. There are some other costs that can be used when developing the plan, such as some limited supplies, some data collection, and limited product testing. For your working capital grant, different types of uses. It could be used for processing costs, so that's either butchering fees, co-packer fees, freezing, labor costs. The important thing to note about labor costs is it cannot go to owner or family labor, but any other workers that you have for processing, marketing, and deliveries, we can cover that. Labels, packaging, jars, containers, shipping costs, software, accounting, insurances, advertising, marketing, websites, a lot of e-commerce setup sites, and professional photography. So some program information, a little bit more specific to Maine. We've historically done very well, as you can see, in the value-added producer grant program up until 2020. We have all of our eligible grants that were submitted have been funded. You'll see that there's some years missing. Those years we did not have a VAPG program. And then in 2020, we still had 11 out of 12 eligible funded. And in 2021, we had 10 out of 12. Though I do want to point out one out of the 12 did withdraw from the competition, so partway through, so it was really 10 out of 11. And then as you see here, almost all of them have been independent producers except for one in 2020, which was a majority controlled producer-based business. Some important information about the grant. The application process is time sensitive. Typically when the NOSA comes out, they only give 60 to 90 days for writing your application. So I would recommend starting early and asking questions. So the NOSA is not released yet for FY22, but if you can always contact me, we can start with last year's toolkit. They don't change very often year to year. So we can get started on that application. It is a daunting application, so there are consultants that can help with the application preparation and administration. If you want a list of those that have said they're interested in working on these types of applications, just let me know. I can get you that list. But you don't have to pay for a consultant if you don't want to. We're always here to help with application questions and anything you have. You do have to be in active production or between seasons of the raw commodity. So we don't do startups. There's typically about a 2-year requirement of how long you've been producing the product. The grant does require 1-to-1 match. So for, let's say, a full $75,000 planning grant, it does require a $75,000 grant. For planning grants, the majority of that match is going to come from cash match because the majority of funds are going to consultant fees. For working capital grants, for a max grant of $250,000, you need $250,000 match. That can be a mix of cash match and in kind. 25% of the total project cost for in kind can be from owner and family labor. So in a fully $500,000 project, that would be $125,000 from labor. You could use raw commodity as match and then some cash to balance it out and score a bit better. Grants can be up to 3 years in length. Important thing people always want. So buildings, kitchens, vehicles are ineligible. Equipment is ineligible. A lot of people really want equipment, and unfortunately, that's one of the few things we cannot do with value added. So how to apply? Contact me for application materials. I'm going to leave my contact information up for a few minutes if anyone wants to jot it down. I did have a slide for questions, but it appears that for some reason I cannot see the participants or unmute you. So unfortunately, I will not be able to take your questions on this Teams meeting. But please feel free to copy this information down. Give me a call or send me an email. We can talk about your project and kind of what you're looking at doing and see if value added works for you. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties and hope to hear from you soon. Have a good rest of your afternoon.